Hey, everybody, welcome back to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I am Tim Derling. I've got my good friend Chris Preston from My Rock and Roll Heaven checking in again, and we are going to do one of our favorite topics. It's a chart rewind. We've done on Tim's Vinyl Confessions, we've stopped down in 1984 several times this year. We're not quite done yet, but for this one, we are doing 40 years ago, the top 100 selling albums in Canada. November 17th, 1984, 40 years ago. I think most of us that have been talking, we all agree 84 was an exceptional year for music.
So good. So good.
And I don't know, I don't really know why. It just seems like new bands were coming out that were really good right off the bat, or like established acts were just hitting a peak. Obviously there were a lot of great soundtracks. It was getting to the soundtrack era, but whatever it is, and such a great mix.
Exactly.
You've got your pop, you've got a little country, you've got some metal, you've got some just straight ahead rock, you've got easy listening. It's all featured here on this chart, and without the divisions that we would later get.
Exactly.
And I think it's a really cool representation of what people were listening to in Canada. And if you were on the border, you probably know there's inevitably, when we do these Canadian charts, I like doing the Canadian charts because inevitably there's going to be names where people outside of Canada aren't going to know the names. Hopefully they look into them. And so we've got some good stuff here. And as is typical, Chris has way more of these albums than I do. In fact, he's got almost half of this chart, which I think speaks to the strength of the music. And
absolutely, Tim.
And like I've said before, this isn't a year-end chart. This is 1 week. This is 1 week in 1984, and just so many strong albums. And obviously there were a lot more than 100, but this is what was selling the biggest this particular week. So, Chris, if you're ready, we're going to get started with the top 100 selling albums according to RPM magazine on this date, or approximately in Canada in 1984. So we're going to start off at number 100. This album is down from 91. First full-length album from Queensryche, The Warning on EMI.
That's a great tape you've got there.
This is an old Columbia House version of The Warning. Had the pleasure of seeing Jeff Tate earlier this year, and from this album he did an M156, which was not expected, but that's fun because he got to use his little voice thing. Machines have no emotion. And also, of course, I think any Queensryche related show, they do take hold of the flame. So that's at number 100. Over to you.
That's a classic, Tim. Absolute classic. So just before I go to number 99, which is an album I've never personally heard, I just want to say too, in regards to what you were talking about this chart and the music at the time, I was going to go through and actually try and total album sales out of this list, but that's a huge task. But when you look at the albums on this chart and some of the biggest selling albums of all time are on this chart.
Yeah.
And it's mind-blowing when you think about how many copies of all these sold. People were consuming music, and it's amazing. We'll get to it as we go through the list, but there's multiple diamond selling albums in Canada.
Yeah, no, that's true. And again, this is 1 week of, one snapshot of time.
Exactly.
And it just happens to have all of these. And even if they're not diamond selling albums, there's 4 million, 5 million, 6 million sellers. Huge, huge albums.
Huge albums. And I love it. I love it. So number 99, you'll recognize his name, member of a very famous group, the Bee Gees. This is Mr. Barry Gibb, and it is Now Voyager on MCA. I like the Bee Gees, but I never ventured into their solo efforts, and this one was down from number 95, so I don't think it got very high on the charts for Mr. Barry Gibb.
Yeah, there was a huge backlash against the Bee Gees through most of the 80s, and so they did solo albums, and they did very well as producers and songwriters. And then towards the end of the 80s, the nostalgia sort of kicked in, and they started, it was okay to like the Bee Gees again.
Right.
But it was very real. Like the whole the disco backlash, it lasted. Even though there's a lot of acts that were essentially making disco, they just called it dance music.
Exactly.
You didn't use the dreaded D word, right? Number 98, a band that was absolutely
Oh,
huge in Canada, could
huge.
not get arrested in the States. I think they sold like in pockets in some of the in border cities, but man, you could not escape this band. And I still hear them a lot on Canadian radio.
Yes.
Platinum Blonde and their debut, the full length debut album, Standing in the Dark, came out in 83, was still selling big in 84. It's holding at 98 this week. I'm assuming it had already made its peak.
Yeah, that had started to come down the charts, but they were Canada's Duran Duran, essentially.
Yeah. I always said, somebody asked me what they sounded like. And I said, if you can imagine a cross between like Duran Duran and Def Leppard,
Yep.
because yes, they looked new wave. And Mark Holmes is a very new wavy singer, but they had electric guitar.
Yeah.
So it was like, or if say if Duran Duran, if all their songs were like Wild Boys, kind of like
Yes.
that.
Yes, exactly. And the girls loved them.
Oh, I mean, yeah, for about a 5-year period, Platinum Blonde was they were household names in
Oh,
Canada,
absolutely.
but they didn't crack into the States.
I thought I had this album, but I don't. So I'm gonna have to actually get it because I like it. And
It's one of the most, if you can find an original CBS Canada box design CD of this album, it's one of the rarest
oh,
CDs to come out of Canada.
okay, you've just challenged me, Tim.
Yeah, wouldn't be too many copies of that floating around.
I'm on the hunt.
Yeah.
Number 97, holding at number 97. And I'm familiar with these guys just because my parents had a couple of these, like a few artists on this list. My parents had copies of these. The legendary Everly Brothers and EB40.
This was a comeback album. I don't think they'd released a new album in quite a long time, and they had a minor hit single on this called "On the Wings of a Nightingale," which was actually written by Paul McCartney. I don't know. I don't know if the album did as well as the single. It's holding at 97, like you said. Also holding this week. Now here's a guy that, again, outside of the States, you might not know his name, but I think you'll know some of his songs. Number 96, Gary O, and his album Strange Behavior, which is on RCA. His full name is Gary O'Connor. And if you're a 38 Special fan, Gary O'Connor wrote Back Where You Belong,
Oh,
One Time for Old Times. I'm sure there's other songs he's written for American artists, but in Canada, this album was probably his best known. He had a song off this called Shades of 45,
the
which
video played nonstop on much
yeah,
music.
yeah,
Nonstop.
pop rock singer songwriter, kind of like Eddie Schwartz, somebody like that.
Right.
So yeah, his album is at 96 this week.
That's a great song, Shades of 45.
Yeah.
New at number 95, another act I'm not familiar with, and I'm assuming they're Canadian. I think this is on Attic or Alert Records. I can't quite tell, but number 95, Warriors and their self-titled album. Couldn't find
Yeah,
much info
just
on
looking
them.
that up, I'm curious because it's on Attic Records, which
Small
is a
Canadian label.
quite a well-known Canadian independent label. They're listed as a Serbian slash Canadian heavy metal band active between 1982 and 1986. It looks like they only did, I think, the one album, and yeah, I'm not sure. And this is also one of those albums that, because Attic was bought up by Unidisc, you can now get the CD to this. They
Exactly.
were on Roadrunner Records in Europe. So I don't know if they were like a new wave of British heavy metal band, but
Yeah, Roadrunner distributed a lot of Attic
yeah,
artists in
and
Europe,
vice
including
versa, right?
including
Yeah,
Lee Aaron. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. New at 94 this week. I don't know if you'd call it a comeback album, but it was a big one, and it had a lot of hit singles on it. Chicago 17, that's new this week. This is when I first became aware of Chicago. There you go. This had Hard Habit to Break, You're the Inspiration Comes a Woman, Stay the Night. Great songs.
Great
And
songs.
all big hit singles too. I mean, this was the David Foster years. And yeah, this album, I don't know if this is their biggest selling album, but I would be willing to guess it's their
So.
best selling studio album.
Yeah, I think you're right. I got into Chicago because of You're the Inspiration, which
Yeah.
played all the time, and I was always afraid to admit to my friends that I owned their albums. So I'm happy to say it now. I own some Chicago albums. Okay, number 93, up one spot from 94 this week. Very, very well known and respected artist Frank Zappa and his album Them or Us. Never got into Frank Zappa, but obviously very influential.
Yeah.
A big, big artist in North America.
Yeah, I really don't know much about Frank Zappa's very avant-garde, very, off the beaten path.
Exactly.
Always great musicians in his band. I mean, Steve Vai started in Frank Zappa's band, but yeah, very much a cult, cult following, but a big cult following, right?
And I think most people know him from his famous PMRC
Oh
when he
yeah, yeah.
visited
I mean,
the Washington to talk
yeah,
about censorship
yeah, yeah. He and
with
Dee Snider were like the main proponents of,
and John Denver.
and John Denver,
Who thought? Who knew?
Rocky Mountain High. Yeah. Also holding at 92 this week. I don't think this was a very big album for them because I think it was the last one they did for Warner Brothers, Debo.
Oh
And
yeah,
Shout.
Steve-O.
Yeah.
Famous for Whip It is really the only song that I ever.
Yeah. I mean, again, I mean, everybody, everybody in our area, we know who Debo is, but it's mainly because of Whip It. And
Exactly. In that
if
video.
people are into soundtracks, they know their version of Working in the Coal Mine.
Heavy metal.
Yeah. Heavy metal.
Brand new at number 91 is a very well-known classic rock AOR band.
Yeah.
Their album Wheels Are Turning.
Yeah. A band that's currently, there's a lot of drama surrounding
Yeah, big
this band.
time
And
drama.
And for all of the classic rock bands that I would have looked for having like drama, REO Speedwagon were not on my bingo card. That kind of came out of nowhere. It's sounds just it's kind of sad, but anyway,
It
yeah.
is. This is I'm pretty sure their last real big selling album, thanks to that
Yes.
number one smash,
Yeah.
Can't Fight This Feeling, which was essentially the first REO Speedwagon song that for me was like, wow, this is a great ballad.
That's the first song I think I ever heard from them.
Yeah,
But I mean, yeah, this the singles are good on this album. The album tracks, not so much.
not so
I
much.
really,
Exactly.
One Lonely Night is really good. And I always really like Live Every Moment. That's not a very big hit single, but I always like that it's an upbeat, positive song. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, as
exactly.
far as 80s power ballads go, it's like the king, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Great one.
Um, a contemporary of these guys going solo. We might see a bandmate of his later on in this, or a former bandmate later on in this countdown. But the debut solo album from Tommy Shaw on A&M Records, Girls with Guns, title song, super catchy song, minor hit, and the album's at 90 this week.
After the implosion of Styx.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks to Mr. Roboto. Number 89, New, a great band. I, though, am not familiar with this album, Tim. Their prior release was massive, Freeze Frame. This is the Jay Giles band, and You're Getting Even. I don't know even if what the big single was off of this one, if there was a
There's
big.
very good reason that this album is obscure, Chris, because Peter Wolf had left.
Right. Lights Out.
So this
Yeah.
is the only album he's not on. We're going to hear from him later too. There's a lot of solo people going solo. Yeah, the full name of this album, I like the title. You're Getting Even While I'm Getting On. And the only single that came off of this was a song called Concealed Weapons, not a big song. And this was it. This 40 years ago, this was the very last Jay Giles band album. They kept recording or they kept touring, or they eventually reunited and toured. But this was their last new album of new music. And you know it's kind of confusing because I mean people know Jay Giles band. I don't
Yeah,
think they know Jay Giles. They
exactly.
probably think Peter Wolf was Jay Giles, but
I
no,
always did,
he was the voice of the band. But this probably didn't get much higher.
unfortunately.
Okay, so number 88. Yeah, another album that, a successful artist who was coming off of a successful album. I don't think I knew he had an album in 84. Steve Miller with Italian X-Rays on Capitol, up 1 to 88 this week. And when an album just climbs up by one in its second week, doesn't bode well for a really high peak.
No, it doesn't. The interesting thing too about as we go through this list and we're talking about guys like Steve Miller and REO Speedwagon is we were kind of at the MTV was getting big, Much Music just launched, and the classic rock guys had some real trouble, right? Like those late 70s bands, Journey, Styx, Jay Giles band, Steve Miller.
Yeah,
They
yeah, who
REO,
didn't
right?
have the look.
They didn't have the look.
There's one band that I can think of, and we are going to be talking about them that were so smart in how they handled that, and they did it better than anybody else. But we'll get to
Yes, we will get to that. I think I know
that.
where you're going with it. Debuting at number 87, the legendary Shaka Khan. I was never a big fan, but the title track for this album, I Feel For You, I remember vividly
Yeah,
playing all the time on radio, and it's still out there. But that was a huge hit for her. Huge hit.
cover of a song written by someone else who we'll be hearing from. And yeah, I mean, it might be one of the first songs I remember hearing all the time on the radio that actually had a rap in it,
Yep.
by courtesy of Grandmaster Flash. That wasn't in the original version, of course. Harmonica by Stevie Wonder. Yeah, it's an 80s classic.
Absolutely.
Um, the band that was on the comeback, debuting this week at 86, fantastic album, Deep Purple and Perfect Strangers. This could be their best album from start to finish. I love this album. I think
Me
it's, I
too.
think it's fantastic.
Me too.
Uh,
And I
All
had no
Door.
idea who Deep Purple was before this.
No, I never. This is when they came up on my radar. Being our ages, I wasn't born when Machine Head came out. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a big seller. Now, as far as them selling a lot of albums, it didn't last after this album, but they're still around. And personally, I think they put out one of 2024's best albums with Equals One, but that's another story.
Exactly, exactly. I remember seeing the video for Knocking at Your Back Door on Much
Yeah,
Music. It was kind of cool, right? It was a
one of so many videos that were sort of post-apocalyptic,
right
right?
in
One,
1984. Wonder
so
what was
many.
going on at that time
Yeah, yeah,
in the world.
yeah.
Number 85, Spandau Ballet and their album Parade. Never was a big fan. Everybody knows their song True from their prior release, which was pretty much, I would call them close to a one-hit wonder over here,
Definitely over here. Yeah,
but
I
had a
think in the UK
better,
it was a little different,
it
but
was
yeah,
a
and I
different.
don't know what would have come off of this Parade album, although it looks like it's dropping from 59, so it must have
It hit, yeah,
done
it must
right
have
in
done okay.
Canada anyway. Yeah, and it had been in the charts for a while. Another favorite album of mine, new,
Yeah, I know you love this one.
84. My favorite Toto album, Isolation. It's the only one that had Fergie Fredrickson on vocals. Not on every song, of course, but I just think this is their best album start to finish. Stranger in Town was the best known song. Should have done better. And yeah, also, it's fitting that Chris and I are doing this video. This is a CRO2 tape. We'll be seeing
Ah,
it for
yes, love
these.
those
So,
tapes.
new at 84 this week, Toto.
How high did that go, Tim? Was that a
Probably not in the States. It barely went gold. Uh, Considering it was coming off Toto 4, it was just a huge drop in sales, and
yeah?
it's a shame.
I'm gonna have to revisit that one because I know you're a big fan. Number 83, holding at number 83, very good album from the metal guys Crocus, The Blitz. This is another one where this was the first time I heard Crocus. And it was thanks to a compilation tape I owned called White Hot, which had
Yeah, yeah.
Midnight Maniac on it.
That was a good compilation.
Good compilation, and
Yeah.
Midnight Maniac is a great track, cool video, and this is also has got their cover of Sweet's Ballroom Blitz on it, which is, I think, a pretty good cover. So Crocus holding at number 83 with the Blitz.
Yeah. Some Canadian connections there. That was produced by Bruce Fairburn, and it contains a song called Boys Night Out, which it was left off of an album that we're going to talk about later. At number 82, down five, it's self-titled. It was not his first album. One of the famous Jacksons, Jermaine Jackson. And I know this, I didn't know the album, but at this time, he had a song on this album called Dynamite, which I remember hearing quite a bit. And I thought was kind of a
Yes, I
cool
do
song.
remember that one.
Yeah. So that's from this album, down five to 82.
And continuing with the Canadian artists at number 81, down one from number 80, is Jane Siberry, and her album No Borders Here. Now, I don't remember if her one song that I know, Mimi's on the Beach, is on
I think
this
so.
record. That
Yeah.
played constantly on Much Music. It was
Yeah.
Canadian content. One little note that I'll say here about the Canadian artists on the RPM chart. Any of our viewers that are watching and look at these charts and wonder what that MAPL designation is beside
Yes.
certain
Yeah.
names, that's CanCon. That's
Yeah.
music, that's artist, that's lyrics, that's producer. And
Yeah.
if you had that completely filled out with all four, you were 100% deemed Canadian content.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is I'm looking at the chart. Every single appearance of that logo is completely full. In other words,
Correct.
the maple and music, artist, producer, lyrics, full CanCon. So if you had an American band record a song by a Canadian artist, it would only be half, but half is all you needed. Dave
Exactly.
Siberry, I would probably describe sort of like Kate Bush, maybe
Yep.
kind of eclectic.
That's fair.
Yeah. At number 80, I definitely remember this band. They had one song that got played an awful lot, and I'm guessing it was from this album. General Public, their album was called All the Rage. It's up 2 to 80, and I remember their song Tenderness being on the radio a lot.
Big one, big video too on Much
Yeah.
Music. It's a good track.
Yeah.
Another Canadian artist coming in at number 79. She had some real success in the 80s. Luba and her albums Secrets and Sins. I think Let It Go was
Yeah.
kind of
She
her
had
big initial
Let
hit.
It Go from this album. The other one I remember is called Storm Before the Calm. But yeah, she got a lot of airplay on Much Music. She was a songwriter and a singer. And just as a side note, and I think it's on this album, but I could be wrong. But do you remember a band called I Napoleon?
No.
No, they were on Geffen Records, and they put an album out in 1991. I think they were American, but I remember them because they covered one of Luba's songs, the ballad "Every Time I See Your Picture, I Cry."
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
So that's kind of where did they hear it? That's the thing that I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Huge artist in the 80s. She's still kicking around today. Great vocalist. New at number 78, Pat Benatar and Tropico. Big hit off of this one was We Belong, right?
Amazing song.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is she's one of my favorite all-time singers. Yeah. Just tons of classic material. Great album.
Yeah.
Number 77, and it's fallen down the charts from number 61, the legendary, and funny enough, the name of the album is Legend, Bob Marley, one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, I think this was a best of, and I think it's the best-selling Bob Marley album. Came out after he died. I think he died in 81.
Yeah.
And became bigger than he was in life, just how it goes. Number 76, a great artist. This album, unfortunately, suffered a little bit from particular
oh boy
particular clip, but yeah, great vocalist, great songwriter, Billy Squier, and his album Signs of Life. There you go. Very rare to find an original CD of this, but it is possible. That album's down from 64 down to 76. Now, I will say it's not. I don't think it's that great an album from start to finish.
Agreed.
But the single "Rock Me Tonight" is a great song.
Oh, it's a great song.
Yeah, unfortunately, that video has, there's debate back and forth. Was that really what killed his career?
Yeah.
But whatever it is, he was like, this was a platinum album, but his sales just dropped like a stone after this, and he couldn't get arrested. But here's the thing about Billy Squier: no one needs worry about Billy Squier because that guy is smart. He owns his publishing.
Smart.
And he's got two songs. There's The Big Beat, and then better known, of course, The Stroke. Those two songs have been sampled by so many rap artists.
Oh, God.
He is just raking it in.
Good for Billy. Good for Billy.
That's why you don't see him on the 80s cruises or the 80s rock goes. He doesn't need to.
Exactly.
He can sit home and just collect the money.
Watch the checks roll in.
Yeah.
Number 75, down from 57. It had been on the chart for 10 weeks. So this band and this album cover, I was terrified of as a kid.
Oh, jeez.
This is the debut, self-titled debut from the heavy metal maniacs Wasp. And man, there were a couple bands back in the day when I see those in the record store, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm 13. This is like, I don't know what this is. I'm scared. But go back
Yeah,
and
there's
listen to
nothing
this.
subtle about that first
Nothing
Wasp
subtle.
album cover.
They had some wild shows and did wild things,
Yep.
and they had stuff banned. But I've gone back and re-listened to early Wasp, and it's good.
Oh, I mean, Blackie Lawless wrote good song, like good, like
Exactly.
sort of metal anthems. But I remember seeing the album cover. That was scary enough. But fortunately, we didn't have much music at this time.
Yes.
But that video for "I Want to Be Somebody," where he's drinking the fake
Oh
blood out of the skull, that would have
my
done me in
God.
right there.
Oh yeah, that was the end for me.
No. Number 74, new this week. This was the follow-up to their big debut album, The Crossing. This band was from Scotland, Big Country, and the album Steel Town.
I have I own their Crossing album, which is great, and I don't think I've heard a song from this album, so I'm gonna have to go and take a listen to it. Number 73, an artist that I'm not familiar with, but did have some success, Ricky Lee Jones and her album The Magazine.
Number 72, I know here, Chris is reaching for it. It's holding this week in its 66th week in the chart.
Crazy.
I'm just taking a real quick look here, Chris. That may be the oldest album in this chart.
Yeah, you might be right.
Over a year in the chart. I see another one that's got 55 weeks in, but yeah, 66 weeks for Billy Joel and Innocent Band, which was like a mini greatest hits unto
Oh my
itself.
God.
Yeah,
This album is this. So I was 13. This album came out and these songs were everywhere. This was one of my most listened to when I was getting into rock music was this one. Tell her
yeah,
about it. Uptown Girl, The Longest Time, Innocent Man. Like like you said, it's a greatest hits record.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's got to be close to Diamond in Canada.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think so.
Massive. Number 71 up from 65. Kind of a you call them a I call him a not easy listening, but soft rock
Yeah.
artist. Chris de Burgh and his album Man on the Line. He had some big hits. Lady in Red, remember from the 80s, was a
Yeah, that's his
huge
best
one,
known. I think the big song off of this album was High on Emotion, which
which is
was
actually a nice
what
song.
for him was kind of a rocker, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's catchy. It's catchy.
Yeah.
That chorus is
And
catchy.
another well, people might know Don't Pay the Ferryman too. That's kind of a fun song. But
Right.
I think he was more successful in Canada. And I think that's true of a lot of UK artists than they were
Yes,
in the
very true.
States.
Exactly.
Number 70. Speaking of Notorious,
Notorious indeed.
man, 43 weeks in the chart. It's down one this week. Motley Crue Shout the Devil on my super cassette. Yeah. I mean, there
Super
that is
cassette.
glaring at you from the source. I didn't see that probably till the mid 90s. I had no idea that's what the record looked like.
Me
I
either.
just always thought it was the photo of the band, which is scary enough, right? But yeah. And if they'd have stayed like this, I don't think they'd have been as well. They definitely wouldn't have been as big. They would have been more like Wasp. They would have been like a gold selling act.
I think you
But
nailed it with that. Absolutely.
yeah, many a fan's favorite Motley Crue album.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
that one is again another one that scared me a little bit back then.
yeah. I'm still
Great
kind of
album though.
scared of them.
Classic. Actually, so the first time I ever saw Motley Crue was thanks to Much Music when it launched and was Too Young to Fall in Love played the video played a lot.
Yeah,
A lot.
I heard of them, but I never actually heard them until I heard Smoking in the Boys' Room.
Yeah, and I think that's true for a lot of
Yeah,
us, absolutely. Number 69, we talked about his band a little bit
yeah,
earlier in the countdown. Down from number 48, it looks like, or 46. And it's Mr. Peter Wolf, the lead singer of Jay Giles Band, and his album Lights Out. The title track was a hit.
yeah,
Video played a fair bit and it's got that, again, that catchy chorus. Lights out.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right?
And you know, the funny thing is, if I don't know what happened with the band, but if that had come out under the Jay Giles band name, it probably
Yeah,
would have been just as big, and they would have kept going. But
you're
anyway,
probably right.
yeah. Number 68, the timeless, the
Timeless
immortal. I
indeed.
think the immortal Willie Nelson, and City of New Orleans. It's down a couple notches this week from 66 to 68.
Willie got a lot of play in our household, so I remember this album, but I don't remember it.
I
Remember it.
remember the song because I think this is the song that goes "Good Morning America, How are you?"
Right, right.
I remember that hearing that on the radio.
Good old Willie.
Yeah,
Number 67, a legendary artist who sadly we lost far too
died
early.
very young. Yeah,
Very young, brilliant guitarist. Mr. Stevie Ray Vaughan at number 67, and his album Couldn't Stand the Weather.
yeah.
I do remember hearing a couple, or not hearing, but seeing the video on Much Music for one of his songs, Cold Shot,
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a funny video. He
which
kept
was a
getting,
funny video. He kept
yeah,
getting
yeah. He kept getting injured.
injured.
Yeah, it's funny. Much Music played a lot of Stevie Ray's video.
Yeah,
They also played the video for the title song "Couldn't Stand the Weather." I remember that one because like the band's playing and it's raining and the wind's blowing in their faces. And also a couple years after this, he covered Stevie Wonder's "Superstition," and that was a funny video
oh,
too.
yes,
With the
yes.
black cat, things kept happening to his entire band, and then Stevie shows up at the end, and it's his
Yeah,
cat.
that's a great one.
I mean, learning things, right? I didn't know that was a cover, so
Yeah,
I
no,
didn't get to
neither
see
did
why is Stevie Wonder in this video. But
I.
you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan reintroduced blues for a generation of guitar players
Absolutely.
because he wasn't 50 years old. You know, he
Yeah,
was a
good
young,
point.
a relatively younger guy, and I think that's the reason a lot of players our age have that taste for the blues. Um, at number 66, it's down 10. I know this is a CR02 cassette that was
It
featured
is.
on our episode, Quiet Riot, and what I guess would be what their fourth album,
Yeah.
Condition Critical. It's down from 46 down to 66.
You know what? A big drop off, yes, from Metal Health, but there's a couple good songs on here. Like they had another Slade cover, right, with Mama, We're All Crazy Now, and I
Yeah,
like Party All Night, which had a fun video too.
yeah.
It's a good album. Oh, number 65. We've got a legendary Canadian artist who I'm not sure got really any play in the US.
I don't think so, but I mean, he's a blues legend, and he
Yeah,
still he
and
still plays blues festivals to this day.
this was a guy who was like a college university era
Yes.
music for us, Mr.
Yeah.
David Wilcox and his album Bad Reputation. He's got so many classic Canadian songs, and I
Well,
think,
yeah, I think this album had a couple. It had like the Riverboat Fantasy and
yep,
Downtown came Uptown, and what I like about him is that he never made any attempt to glam himself up.
nope,
He
he was a
just showed
dork.
up in his button up, button down shirt. He looked like everybody's dad, right? And he's just
Exactly,
playing guitar and yeah, yeah.
legendary.
Um, 64 up from 73. I knew we'd be hearing from this guy. We had Tommy Shaw earlier, and Styx, former Styx vocalist Dennis DeYoung, a song that the title song was a big hit for him. Really, his only big solo song, Desert Moon. That's at 64 this week.
Yeah, Dennis had some great material. I think he and Styx just completely went in opposite directions. So
Yeah,
he struck out on his own. So number 65, or sorry, 63,
yeah.
and fairly new, second week on the chart. An artist who had success with her debut, and we'll talk about it later on. And it's her second album, Madonna's Like a Virgin, which launched her obviously into superstardom. Um,
Yeah.
Chock full of hits. There's the back cover. The video.
Iconic. Like, right? You see classic pictures of Madonna, those are tend to
Those
be
are them,
what's,
right? Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's what she wore in that famous performance on the MTV Music Awards when she was riding all over the stage in her
yeah.
outfit. But a great album and absolutely timeless.
You know what's interesting, like looking back, what was the big difference between her debut and this album is that at least most of the songs, I think, on this album, at least most of the singles, had a live band performing them.
Right.
And if you listen, it's funny, if you listen to a song like Material Girl or Like a Virgin, I believe that's Tony Thompson from Chic and later Power
Ah,
Stroke drums. He's playing the song like the fills that he does. He's playing them like a rock song,
right.
which
He
kind of
was
makes sense because I think Nile Rodgers produced this album,
Nile Rodgers did produce it.
so that would have been bandmate. So
Yeah, and he's a Tony Thompson's just a powerhouse drummer,
yeah,
right?
he died
Awesome. That's it.
not
That's
quite.
awesome.
Yeah. Let's see, number 62, Babs,
Go
Barbara,
Babs.
like butter. Barbara Streisand and her album Emotion. It's up fairly big jump too, 74 up to 62 this week.
And that album was in my house. I remember it. New at number 61, one of the biggest artists of the 80s, biggest bands of the 80s,
Yep,
Duran Duran. This is their live album, Arena, as you can see, recorded around the world in 1984, but included the new track, Wild Boys, which was a
great,
huge,
great,
huge.
great song. Video scared me a little bit.
The video was interesting, and
That thing in the water.
if you want to watch the full movie, the arena movie that video was taken from, it's a really interesting watch. Cheesy as hell,
Yeah,
corny, but a lot of fun. This album for me was a big one because I had just gotten into Rio and hearing these songs live was really cool. They're still a great live band, and they open every show with Wild Boys, and it kills.
yeah. Number 60 up from 71, UB40, and the album is called Jeffrey Morgan. And I've never seen Jeffrey spelled like that before.
Nope, me either. And I have no idea what songs are on this, but hey, UB40 was had some big success as well. Number 59, a very famous Canadian songbird, we will say.
Uh-huh.
The legendary Anne Murray. There were Anne Murray songs playing in our house all the time. Um, Personally not a fan, but hey, she is a legend, and it's her album Heart Over Mind.
And just to illustrate what I love about these charts, at number 58,
This is great.
the second band album from Dio, The Last in Line. It's holding this week 13 weeks in the chart. This was a platinum album, and I love the fact that Dio sits, next to Anne Murray, next to UB40, next to Duran Duran, Barbara Streisand. It was all, it was whatever was the big sellers, right?
How
That's a
great is that
super cassette too.
that
Super.
you've got the evil Murray
Murray, yeah, I
right in
love
front of
that
Anne
name,
Murray.
Murray. Yeah,
Couldn't have worked out any better.
yeah.
Number 57. Oh boy. I could talk about this a
Yeah,
long,
where to begin,
long
right?
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
My favorite Bryan Adams album, Reckless, this launched him into superstardom
yeah,
and is for me a desert island album. This is a greatest hits album. This would go on a little bit of a slow climb,
yeah,
but would be on the charts in the US and Canada for a long, long time, well into 1985, and an all-time classic, Canadian legend. And MAPL full on this one.
yeah.
There would be a lot of discussion about Mr. Adams later on, but
And
we
he
will
would have
get
a
into
lot to
that.
say about the CRTC come
He
1991.
he took out a full page article in RPM
Yeah.
chatting about that.
Um, and up from 75, big jump this week. I mean, obviously
Big jump.
this would be his biggest. Surprisingly enough, I'm a little surprised by this. That this album or Waking Up the Neighbors, neither of those are diamond albums. I would have thought that they would be by now, but 6 million is huge. But
Yeah.
I just thought they would have been bigger selling. I mean, his songs, particularly from Reckless, never far away from the radio.
Yeah.
I still recommend to anybody get the 30th
Oh,
anniversary
yeah,
edition
agreed.
because it's got so many other great songs on it,
Including the title track.
including the title track, which was later recorded by Loverboy as
Oh,
Dangerous. Boys Night Out, which was on the Crocus album a while back.
yep.
The original version of Teacher Teacher, and my personal favorite, Let Me Down Easy.
Oh, good song.
Love that song. Yeah. Okay, here's another album that did fairly well. Okay,
Yeah,
no.
okay.
So, all right, I'm wrong. How did I miss this? This is the most weeks in the chart at 98 weeks at this point. At this point, and it's still at 56. Came out in October of 82, I think. Of course, Michael Jackson and Thriller. And this week, I mean, it's down 1 to 56. But again, it's just, that means that there was a certain amount of people that just kept still buying it,
Absolutely.
which is amazing.
All-time classic, one of the greatest albums of all time. Absolutely. Number 55 this week, down from 50. A new wave band that had some big hits that you may know of. This is A Flock of Seagulls and their album, The Story of a Young Heart. Iran was massive for them from their debut, but they obviously still carried some momentum from that with this album. One I'm not really familiar with, but had moderate chart success.
Yeah. Number 54, a very famous sort of not folk, but like singer-songwriter, wrote a lot about political issues. It's maybe his biggest album. It's when I first heard him, Bruce Cockburn, with his album Stealing Fire. This had two of his best known songs.
Yeah.
Lover in a Dangerous Time, which of course Bare Naked Ladies had a big hit with, and also I Had a Rocket Launcher, which actually got some MTV play. And that album is down from 51 to 54.
Yeah, Bruce is a legend for sure, up here in Canada especially. Number 53, up from number 52 in its 20th week on the chart. One of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
Honeymoon Suite's self-titled debut album. Love this album cover. This is so cool.
Yeah.
We played this nonstop. This was one of my favorite albums of 1984. And side one, I mean, it's all great, but side one is like just you like everything on side one is excellent. There's so many songs on here that could have been singles too, past the ones that were obviously issued. But this is a classic Canadian rock album from a band that is still going strong with pretty much all original members other than Peter Nunn. Get out and see them. Great.
Yeah, with new music, they put out a good new album this year called Alive. Derry Green just put out a solo album, his very first solo album too. So productive too. Yeah, and still great live. At number 52, up from 70, this was a big jump. Julian Lennon with his album Valet. I've never been too sure how to pronounce it. Valet. This, of course, came out 4 years after the death of John Lennon, and I remember hearing. I didn't know what the song was called. I just knew that sitting on a pebble by the river playing guitar. And to this day, it's pretty uncanny how much he sounded like his father, at least on that song. Like that sounded like a lost John Lennon solo song, but it was a big hit. I think a bigger hit was Too Late for Goodbyes, which is a fun, catchy one. This was a successful album for him. Atlanta.
Yeah. And then he went a little bit off to kind of tried more of a rock thing with his next one, which had Michael J. Fox in the video for Stick Around. You remember that?
Right. Yeah.
But he's a great artist. Number 51, big jump here from 67. It was out its fourth week on the chart. And it's Mr. Billy Ocean and his album Suddenly. I had the LP for this, but I couldn't find it. But I listened a lot to this album. One of my favorite songs from that year is Loverboy.
Which is a Mutt Lange co-write, and you can
tell. Co-write.
Yeah.
Which
and it would not be the last time that he worked with Billy Ocean.
And a very weird video that, again, a little bit post-apocalyptic.
A little bit post-apocalyptic, little Star Wars.
Little Star Wars-y, yeah, exactly. But Caribbean Queen is huge,
little Mos Eisley Canteen.
Yeah, the Mos Eisley Canteen. But a big album for Billy Ocean. Big album.
Number 50, down from was a live album, and there was a concert video that went with it, Talking Heads and Stop Making Sense.
Great band. Yeah. Number 49, down from number 30, another really good band that I think flies under the radar a bit. It's The Fix, and their album Phantoms. They had some big hits from Reach the Beach, their prior album, but their catalog is excellent. They're an underrated English band that kind of straddles that line with new wave, rock, and great songs, just great songs.
And a unique sound.
Very unique.
They were produced, I think most of their albums were produced by the late Rupert Hine, and it's got that I don't know. There's something about the way the guitars are recorded. It's very very specific to that band.
Exactly.
Um, at number 48, I talked about there being a lot of great soundtracks. This was a pretty good one. Teachers, the Nick Nolte movie, and I mentioned Teacher Teacher, but Brian Adams, Jim Vallance wrote it. 38 Special had a hit with it. That was the first song. That sort of, I guess you could call it the theme from this
Yeah.
from this movie. But there are other great songs on here as well. This had the original version of one of my all-time favorite Night Ranger songs, Interstate Love Affair.
Mm.
Slightly different recording than that ended up on Seven Wishes, if you want to check out the differences. There's a Freddie Mercury song on here called Fooling Around. Eric Martin has a great song here called I Can't Stop the Fire. It's a good soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a soundtrack I've had a hard time finding, which is interesting.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the cassette, but I CDs are scarce.
Yeah,
They're scarce.
exactly.
Because
It's a great.
84, a lot of albums were being made on CD, but some just didn't seem
Yep,
to. Uh and soundtracks are weird because unless it was super huge, like some of the ones we'll be talking about, they tended to get lost or forgotten.
exactly. Yeah. Um, Number 47, Canadian band that had a ton of success with a huge hit of theirs called Rise Up. This is the Parachute Club and their album At the Feet of the Moon. Saw them get inducted last year into the Canadian Rock of Fame, Walk of Fame. Well deserved. They had some success even working with John Oates on one of
Yeah,
their
yeah. Yeah,
uh,
they weren't around very long. They had like a mini LP and then they had this album and then they had the next one, which is the one that John Oates worked with him with song Love is Fire. He
yeah.
actually sang on that one. But this one, I vividly remember seeing the video to this song.
Yep.
This is before we had much music in my hometown, but I remember on Saturday nights, there used to be a show we had a network called ASN, the Atlantic Satellite
Oh, yes,
Network.
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, and they played a show called I think it was called Canada's Top 20. And what was different about that show is it wasn't singles driven, it was albums driven.
Oh,
There were videos from whatever the top 20 albums were. And this video played every week for I don't know
yeah.
how
It was a
many
big
weeks.
song.
Yeah. Number 46, I mean, another one of, with Duran Duran and then Flock of Seagulls, and I probably say ABC, it's called The Second British Invasion, right? And
Yeah.
the Thompson twins were right up there. And their album Into the Gap, that's down one this week. This had two big hit singles. It had Hold
Huge.
Me Now and also Doctor Doctor both came off this album.
Hold Me Now is another one of my favorite songs from '84. Just a
Yeah.
classic. At number 45, another legendary Canadian band. I don't know if they got a ton of success in the US. Probably not.
Very
Um,
controversial. So
Very
probably
controversial.
not. They were probably known, but it was more infamous than famous.
You're gonna have to help me out with the title on this
Oh
one
boy,
too.
O Tempora O Mores. It
Yeah,
looks
because I can't quite
Latin.
see it on my printout, but I
Yeah,
think
I don't
you're
know what
right.
it means, but it looks Latin to me.
And Carol Pope and Kevin
Staples.
Maples
Yeah.
were the two driving forces of Rough Trade and tons of controversial, very ahead of its time.
Oh yes, High School
What?
Confidential, and yeah,
Yeah,
and our good friend Sean Kelly has played with Rough Trade in more recent years.
absolutely he has. Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of big soundtracks, one of
Oh,
the biggest from the '80s, chock full of hits, is the Footloose soundtrack. It's holding steady at 44 in its 37th week. This is a really enjoyable soundtrack, nice mix of artists, and yeah, it's deserving of that status. If you can still find this one quite easily.
yeah, and this one, like you said, the artists on this are right. You got everybody from Sammy Hagar and Kenny Loggins and some dance music, and it's great from start to finish. If you're in
Yeah,
the mood,
Bonnie Tyler,
Bonnie Tyler,
Shalimar. Yeah,
yeah, scenes from the
yeah,
movie, great soundtrack, great
yeah.
soundtrack. Number 43, one of the biggest artists of all time from the Beatles, Mr. Paul McCartney. This was up from 62, big jump in its third week, and his album Give My Regards to Broad Street. I remember my parents had this one, and it got a lot of play in our house.
No
Uh,
more lonely nights.
no More Lonely Nights. was kind of for me one of those songs that became like one of my, again, I didn't really tell anybody, but it was a favorite song of mine. I love the
It's a great song.
and how it builds,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a
David Gilmour on the guitar solo.
so good. So
Yeah.
good.
This was actually a soundtrack too, because it was
Yes.
a movie, and the movie's not generally looked at.
No.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but hey,
No.
that was one great song.
Exactly.
Yeah. Number 42, Kiss. This was a bit of a comeback album for them. It was their first platinum album in 5 years, Animalized. Now, it's at number 42 this week, down one. And, I'm a big Kiss fan. This is not one of my favorite Kiss albums. I think it's got some fantastic songs on it, but
Me too.
I don't know.
It's yeah, it's one of those ones for me that the albums around this one for them
Yes.
I prefer,
Yeah.
but the classic is Heaven's on Fire, obviously,
Yeah.
which is an all-time top
Yeah.
10 Kiss song, I think.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the first Kiss song I ever heard too, which is cool. Number 41 from a very big artist from the 70s and into the 80s. Up from number 38, Mr. Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
And this is his album Camouflage.
Yeah.
This is the first Rod Stewart music I ever heard. Another
I have never seen that before. I've seen the cover, but I've never seen that red. That is cool.
yeah,
Super cassette.
for a super cassette to have the
Did you have that when we did the episode? Because I don't remember seeing that.
no, I didn't. I didn't.
Oh,
I picked this up later.
I've seen white ones, but that's the first red one I've ever seen. But when you see something like that, that means it's a big artist.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they
exactly.
just would have run it off like everybody else's album, right?
Infatuation,
Yeah.
huge
I don't
hit.
know how politically correct that song is, but boy,
No,
is
if
it catchy. It sure is. And the video is terrible,
the
but
video is
it sure is
terrible,
catchy. It's a
but
catchy song.
it's a catchy song. First Rod Stewart song I really enjoyed and
I
liked.
think it might be the first thing I ever heard from him. Either that one or Some Guys Have All the Luck.
Yeah, it was a big album for him. So
Yeah.
good, another good one.
Yeah. Number 40, another album that's been in the charts for a long time. 45 weeks, it's down 5 to 40. Of course, Van Halen in 1984. Huge album. By now, I think that they would have played their final show of that tour, because I think that final show was in September. So, end
Yep.
of an era.
End of an era for sure. That was like another one. A lot of these, like I said, a lot of these albums, first time me hearing a
If
band.
Jump was the first I'd ever heard of Van Halen, ever.
Jump was the first I ever
Yeah.
heard. And I remember seeing that video
Yeah.
play again, pretty much music on shows like Video Hits and Good Rockin' Tonight.
You know where I remember seeing it? Switchback. Switchback with Stan the Man Johnson.
My God, we are too Canadian.
Man. Yeah, and I remember Switchback was like what would you call it? It was like a variety show,
Variety show.
but they would play videos once in a while. Did they have
Yep.
skits or no?
First time I ever saw Radio Gaga was on that.
Yeah, but they'd also for some reason they would rerun Get Smart. They'd rerun an episode of Get Smart and it was on at CBC for like 2 hours. And I actually, what's really cool is I think 93, when I was in my first year of radio broadcasting, I actually met Stan because he came to talk to our class. So that was kind of cool.
That is cool. That's awesome. At number 39, the debut album from a Canadian legend, superstar, First Offense from Corey Hart. This was a big album in Canada, but also it did have some success in the US
I
thanks
think it was
to
a gold record in the States, and it had a top 10 single.
Sunglasses at Night, remember?
Yeah. Oh,
Great
yeah.
video with Lori Brown.
Lori Brown, yeah.
Music. She stars in that with him. And he had a ballad on this one called It Ain't Enough that did very well.
I think she's in that video too, isn't she?
I think she is, yes. She was quite young at the time too.
Yeah.
So great album.
Number 38, Up To, Sheena Easton. The album's called A Private Heaven. There were two big songs off of this album. The first one was Strut, great song, great pop song. And the other one was a song written by Prince that ended up on the PMRC's Filthy 15 and a little tune called Sugar Walls. Y'all can look it up.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Number 37, another legend, Diana Ross and her album Swept Away.
The only thing I know about this album, I think this must have had the song Missing You, which was about think that might have been one of the songs that came out about Marvin Gaye, who died
Right.
this
There were a few.
very,
Yeah.
very, very tragically. Number 36 down five, the last big album for the Jacksons. This had Torture, and it also had a song called State of Shock,
Yep.
which some people know, some people don't. Of course, it's a duet with Michael Jackson and Mick Jagger, but originally it was supposed to be Michael Jackson and Freddie Mercury. And you can hear versions of that song with Michael and Freddie. The album's called Victory, and it's down to 36 this week.
Number 35 in its third week on the chart would become a massive,
Moving
massive,
right along, yeah. Huge jump.
massive hit, right? Huge jump from 56. Second album from Wham, Make It Big, which launched them into global superstardom. Classic songs on this one as well. I thought I had this one again, but I couldn't find it. If, just as an aside, if you haven't seen the Wham documentary, give it a watch. It's
It's good.
excellent.
Yeah,
Very
I've
good.
seen it come up, and I thought, oh yeah, that might be so. Okay,
Very good.
Um, yeah, it's funny because my parents weren't exactly up on contemporary music, and if anything, like mom would get a country cassette once in a while. But "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go" was such a big song, and it had that '60s feel to it,
Yeah.
that my dad actually brought this album home, which was weird. It was like my father brought something home that was on the radio station that I listened to.
Yeah, that's a little
But yeah, I mean, it had four big hits. A lot of people forget it had four big hit singles because, most people know "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go" and "Careless Whisper." But then there was "Everything She Wants" and there was "Freedom."
Yeah,
So
Freedom's a
yeah,
great song too.
yeah. Number 34, British, I guess you'd call, I don't know if you call them new wave or not, Psychedelic Furs, with their album Mirror Moves. It holds at 34, 23rd week in the chart.
At number 33, Holding, 29th week on the chart. Another artist that we lost far too soon.
Yeah.
She has a great voice, and this album and the title track are outstanding. It's Laura Branigan and her album Self Control, which, as I said, featured that title track, which is one of my favorite songs of the 80s. That riff is killer.
Which I used to think that song was actually called "Creatures of the Night."
Which, yeah, you could go that way for sure. And a
Yeah.
very, very interesting, somewhat risque
Yeah.
video that
Yeah.
was,
Great
yeah.
song. Holding at 32 this week. One of his biggest albums, one with two covers. I've got one of them. Well, I've got the other one on vinyl and CD. Kim Mitchell, with Kimbo Logo, his first full-length solo album, and of course, probably the better-known cover is the one of him in the hat, and the
Yeah.
sunglasses, and the cigarette with his Strat, but with
I don't
the
think I've
red.
seen that cover before right there.
I've got this one on vinyl, and I don't think I don't think there's any CDs with it. But yeah, for some reason, there's two covers. It's just one of those little thing. This was a big album. Of course, it's got "Go for Soda," but it also has "All We Are," great ballad, and "Feel It Burn" was a single. It was really good. "That's a Man." Those were all radio songs. This is a good album all the way through.
Yeah, it's a classic for sure. Number 31, down from 21. Again, diversity on this chart is amazing.
Yep, I
You've
love it.
got
Yes.
heavy metal legends, Iron Maiden, and their killer album, Power Slave. This artwork, like, can you like?
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
If you look really close, and is this the one where it says Indiana Jones was here or something?
it's quite possible. I could spend hours looking
Yeah.
at their
You'd almost kind of have to have the vinyl to find
Yes,
it.
absolutely. You don't
Yeah.
want to kill your eyes, but this is regarded by a lot of fans as a favorite, top Iron Maiden album for many fans, and led to their absolutely massive, legendary World Slavery tour, which bore the album Live After Death, which is a classic. But this was sitting at number 31 this week.
My cousin Chris he's 5 years older than me. He's older than me anyway. He was like the first metalhead I ever personally knew. And I remember when we'd go visit my aunt and uncle, he'd go stay with some buddies. I'd always stay in his bedroom. And Eddie was everywhere. He was a huge Iron Maiden fan. And I remember he went to see them on this tour. They actually played in Moncton. And the opening act is in a band that we're going to be talking about sometime later.
Yes.
Number 30, down five. Now, not a famous soundtrack aside from the title song, but that alone is enough to say, "Hey, Ghostbusters,
Who are you going to
Ray Parker
call?
Jr." And I mean, you almost have to have that anyway, just to have the cover.
Right?
Yeah.
All-time classic. Yeah. I will
Remember
say
going to see that in the theater? That was, yeah, it wasn't the first movie I saw in a theater, but it was among probably the first 10 movies I ever saw in a theater.
exactly. The rest of the soundtrack, I don't recall here are seeing as hits, but there is a Laura Branigan song on here called Hot Night, and there's a Thompson Twin song on here called In the Name of Love. So
That
there you
makes
go.
sense because they were on Arista.
Right.
And also, there's Cleaning Up the Town by the Bus Boys.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. That's yep,
Yeah, featuring
exactly.
Vic Johnson, who would end up playing with Sammy Hagar years later.
Right,
But that
right.
song is probably known by most people. I think when they get their first phone call and they scramble to the
Yes.
vehicle, that's the song that's playing.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Number 29 up from number 42 the prior week is Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. Big, 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 big songs on here. Relax, which was
And controversial, right? Relax
very
was very
controversial.
controversial. You
I think
listen to
was
it now and you're like, why? It's pretty
yeah,
tame, but
tame, but in this era
yeah,
of what was going on, it got banned in the UK, and I think led to even bigger success because people were like, "Oh, it's banned! I got to get
yeah,
this."
yeah.
And if you remember the song Two Tribes with the video
Yes. Oh, yes.
with Reagan and
Wasn't it Reagan and
Brezhnev,
Gorbachev in a boxing ring?
yeah, Brezhnev and
Yeah.
Reagan
Yeah.
duking it out, very political,
In
right?
the heart of the Cold War.
In the heart of the Cold War.
Yeah. Number 28 down five. I think you could say this was probably their peak because I think there were a lot of hit singles off this album. The
A
Pointer Sisters
lot.
and Breakout because they had Jump for My Love, which is a number one song. I think it had I'm So Excited or a remake of it. Um, Automatic, which is a cool sort of new wavy song for them. Oh, you
Yep.
got said even better.
And don't forget Neutron Dance.
Is that on that album?
It is on this album.
Okay, of course it was on Beverly Hills Cop
Yeah.
soundtrack, and yeah, it was a big.
This is a big album when I didn't realize that all of those. So those are the four Pointer Sister songs that I know
Yeah.
on one
Oh, you
album.
probably you'd know a few more, but I mean these are the big ones. I
These are the
mean, you
big
know,
ones.
like He's So Shy,
Oh, right, right,
Fire,
right. You're
but
right.
and after that they had Dare Me, which was a semi hit, and
And
of
Twist.
course everybody in our generation knows their best known song, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's the Pointer Sisters.
I had totally forgotten that. You're
Yeah.
right. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Number
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
27, right?
Love this album.
This was, I'm gonna say this is one of the first heavy metal albums that I bought myself.
Yeah.
And it was
Probably one of the
because,
first heavy metal bands I actually wasn't scared of and liked the song.
yeah,
The song,
Helix, Walking
yeah.
the Razor's Edge. And this was, I remember seeing the video for Rock You, and I'm like, this is amazing. I have to have this. Another, these guys had some interesting videos, a little bit of like, these days it would be viewed as, and there was
Oh,
some,
yeah. Well, I mean, the Rock You video has a variation that I don't
it,
remember seeing back in the day, but
it does.
probably mostly is Give Me Good Lovin'.
So I don't know if many people know this, but like you said, Tim, there's alternate versions of a few of their videos that were specifically filmed for Playboy, the pay
Yes.
channel in the US. Interesting. But this album is their big breakthrough. And this really turned them into big, big stars in Canada,
In
especially.
Canada,
And
yeah.
they toured heavily on this one.
Yeah.
Great, great album. And still
Unfortunately,
active.
they never really broke through into the States. The albums were released there, but it's a shame because they had what it took to break through to be that mainstream, to have top 40 singles as well as being a really
Absolutely.
big band. Yeah. Number 26 holding this week. It's one of my mother's favorite artists. She had a lot of his albums. This was
Mine
not one,
too.
but Kenny Rogers and What About Me?
He's a legend. And I love all of his work. But number 25, up two from 27, Prince Protege, Sheila E. and her album Glamorous Life, which that title track was a massive hit. Video played everywhere. Great percussionist.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
a great song.
I've seen clips of her doing drum solos that if you
Oh,
are listening, is that Neil Peart? Like, I mean, she's
yeah,
amazing.
she's fantastic.
um, Number 24, up from 36, a fairly, or 35, I think it's 35, a one-time album project, the Honey Drippers, Volume 1, and that's all there ever was. Of course, this was the first time I'd ever heard of Robert Plant or heard his
Yep,
voice.
me
I
too.
had I would have had no, if you'd have said Led Zeppelin, I'd be like, what is that? I had no idea. It was right around this time too, because and I didn't realize that Jimmy Page was part of this too, but I just knew Robert Plant because he was in the video. And there was not just Sea of Love, but I also remember hearing Rockin' at Midnight, which I
Rockin' at
like that
Midnight.
one too.
Yeah, very
Uh,
50s-ish, right? Like
yeah, like throwback. I mean, like you
throwback.
can't. My mother and father liked their version of Sea of Love because it was like an oldie song, right?
Yeah.
But I remember it was not too long after that that the Firm came out with Radioactive, and that was when I first heard, oh, Jimmy Page. Like there was a lot of bands because Eric Clapton had Forever Man, so that's when I first started hearing about a lot of these older uh, rock classics. But you have to start somewhere, right? Like
Exactly.
you know, Led Zeppelin, Cream, Bad Company. These meant nothing to me at the time.
Me too. Me too. Number 23, very famous duo, one of the best of all time, Daryl Hall and John Oates, and their album Big Bam
Oh, this had
Boom.
so many big hit singles off of it, and it's it's really sad what happened to them, how they, whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know. But Out of Touch is one of my favorite 80s.
Oh, I never get tired of it. And I never get tired of Method of Modern Love either.
Yeah,
They're just great pop songs.
so
I
good.
also really like Some Things Are Better Left Unsaid.
Yeah.
And listen to Mickey Curry's drums on that.
Oh, yeah. Mickey Curry's
He does
amazing.
like a drum solo in the middle of it. It's amazing.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why he doesn't play a lot on Reckless is because he was involved in
That's right.
recording Big Bang
Yeah,
Boom.
it's interesting. He kind of flip flopped
Yeah.
between Hall and Oates and Brian Adams, yeah, and other sessions. Uh, at number 22, this was another contemporary album that my father had. He brought this cassette home because he really liked sad songs say so much. Elton John and Breaking Hearts. It's down
Yeah.
two this week.
That was a big one for Elton.
Yeah,
And again, another example of
the
diversity
variety. Yeah.
charts, right? We go from Elton John and we go to the legendary Rat.
I can't. You know what? I like this band more now than I ever did.
Yeah.
Their music is just it's timeless. It holds up so well.
Well, and the songs are just so well
Yeah,
written.
and they never did a bad album. They never really did a
They
bad
never
album.
did. And this is their debut, full-length debut with the song that launched them into superstardom, Round and Round, which the video is amazing. The song is, I think, if you ask me, I think that Round and Round is the defining song of 80s glam metal. I think it
Yeah,
really,
it's so intelligently written.
yeah.
The riff there's just so many parts to it that just work so well. But the whole album is good. Lack of communication, Wanted Man, You're in Trouble, Scene of the Crime. It's just all good all the way through.
And I love that Rat is reissuing, or Stephen Piercy or whatever is reissuing a bunch of this stuff and
Yeah,
has reissued a bunch of these. I'm
yeah.
looking forward to picking it up, but classic.
Number 20, another soundtrack, although this one's different in that it's, I think, all one group
Yeah.
masquerading as another group. Eddie and the Cruisers, also known as, well, it was actually John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, the soundtrack. And the big song, of course, was On the Dark Side, which I cannot tell you how many people I've had to correct in the last 40 years say, no, that is not Bruce Springsteen.
No, it is not. Very true. Number 19. This album had been on the charts for 83 weeks, it looks
Yeah,
like.
almost as many as Thriller. Yeah,
Thriller, yeah. Up actually just down one from the prior week, and it is an all-time classic.
to still be in the top 20. And by the way, folks, this is a U.S. Columbia House cassette. This is what they used to look like, and I think it is about the
They're
ugliest
terrible.
cassette design
The worst.
in existence. It's just so bland. Yeah, that just
I
has
had
to be
no
the top
idea who
I have.
I had no idea who ZZ Top was before this, and
This
of
is the first
course
time I heard of them, and this is the band
the videos
from
and
the '70s that made they were so smart in how they
so smart.
remarketed themselves with the cars and the girls and the furry guitars and the whole image thing and all of those three videos they did. Totally reinvented themselves and it worked.
I remember going and shopping and searching for the ZZ Top keychain
Oh yeah,
because I needed that for to have my one key on. But this is like a greatest hits album too for me. It's a classic. I need to frame this. I love this cover work artwork.
it's so iconic too, right? So such an iconic image.
Absolutely.
Number 18, up four this week. This is someone else who was going solo from a big band, Roger Hodgson, In the Eye of the Storm. This had his song Had a Dream, Sleeping with the Enemy, which was this video creeped me out. But it was kind of a fun song. And this album did really well in Canada. I don't think it did very well in the States, but this was
No,
a big album for him.
Supertramp was huge in Canada and Roger
Yep.
Hodgson as well.
Yeah.
For
I think
whatever
that, I
reason.
think basically like the Supertramp fans just say, yeah, we'll get this too. We'll get this
Absolutely.
one too.
Absolutely. Another classic album coming in at number 17 from one of my favorite artists of all time, Mr. Billy Idol. Definitely his breakthrough Rebel Yell with the title track. I went through at least three cassettes of this album. That's how much I played it. Flesh for Fantasy is a favorite. Eyes Without a Face is kind of real first big top 10 US hit. And of course, Steve Stevens, underrated. Yeah, one of the best guitarists from the era. And they still are. I just saw Billy again live. My God, unbelievably good. Unbelievably good. He should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I'm really surprised he's not. I don't think people realize how good a singer he actually is.
Oh, amazing
The,
voice.
the guy can croon. Like he's
Yeah.
got this cool, yeah. Uh Now this is interesting because earlier, where were we? Number
Oh,
63.
yes.
We had the second Madonna album, Like a Virgin, which was climbing. But at this week, number 16, her debut album is also climbing. It's up one. So two albums climbing the charts.
Yeah. How cool is that? And this
Yeah.
one, uh, I'm a Madonna fan. Borderline is, I think, her best song ever. And this is a more, I mean, dance music kind of
It
was
was disco when people weren't using the word disco. I mean, listen, Holiday
correct.
is a disco song.
Correct. And a lot of this is very
Yeah.
disco-esque.
Flip that around again, Kurt. I've seen lots of Warner Group albums from Canada with the maple leaf
Yep.
on them, but I've never seen one where the maple leaf wasn't up in one corner.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This
It's
one
right
is
underneath.
underneath the song
Yeah.
titles. Never seen
Love
one.
the Canadian logo. Number 15, another huge album from the 80s. This
Oh
one was massive.
yeah,
Lionel Richie's Can't Slow Down. This was played nonstop in our house because it had his best known song, I think, um, all night long.
yeah.
But other big hits, Penny Lover and Running with the Night, and remember Hello with the weird
Oh yeah,
video.
yeah,
But this is Lionel's best-selling release and
yeah.
an 80s classic.
Holding at number four, we got a bunch of albums from 15 through 11. They're all holding in the same
Yes,
place. At number 14, we have Julio Iglesias
Julio.
at 1100 Bel Air Place. Now, I'm not sure, but this might have been, if not the first, then one of the first albums that he sang in English. And I
Yeah.
know this one had the big duet with Willie Nelson, To All the Girls I've Loved Before, but I know this, I do remember seeing this album out there. So
Yeah.
this was definitely like an international breakthrough because he was already like a
Oh,
superstar in
massive.
South America, right? Like he was well into his 40s, I think, at this point, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden he's got this big pop single.
Yeah, this album was big in our house too.
Yeah.
Up at number 13 and holding is Scandals
Yeah.
album featuring Patti Smythe,
Yeah.
Warrior, featuring that classic title track, The Warrior. There's a few other good songs on here. Only the Young, you might recognize that.
Yeah, that's was recorded before Journey's version,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
the same song. Yeah.
Our CRO2 CBS
Oh
cassette.
yes. Yeah. Please check that episode out if you're curious about these cassettes that look
Absolutely.
like this and you want to see a lot of them.
But this was one of the videos that Much Music in its early days played constantly
Oh
was
yeah.
the Warrior, and another fun one, another fun 80s video.
Yeah. Holding at number 12, another, I'm going to say a lot of younger fans, the first heavy metal band they ever really liked,
Yeah.
Twisted Sister.
And if you listen to Mr. Sean Kelly talk about this one,
Oh, yes.
this was the Dee Snider and Twisted Sister was what got Sean Kelly into wanting to be a musician.
Yeah. Please get his book, Don't Call It Hair Metal. It's a great read.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah, this was a big, big,
It's the
big,
one that
big
scared me a
album.
bit though, Tim. Like look at Dee with that big bone.
D was pretty scary. I even remember before we had Much Music, there was a commercial that used to play just on regular TV, advertising like subscribe to Much Music as a
Yes.
pay TV, and it just there were clips from a bunch of videos, but there was one that was just, and it's that D coming down the stairs,
Yes. Yes.
dragging the dad with him. That was I don't know why I remember that stuff so vividly, but yeah.
That was great. Number 11, holding at number 11, John Waite's album No Breaks. Massive, massive hit on this one. I ain't missing you at all, that
Yeah.
ballad. Um, John Waite is, I've discovered more recently and gone back into his career with the Babies. And man, what a great, great singer-songwriter.
I he was never really like he had a couple of hits with the Babies. Of
No,
course, Missing You was a number one song. Yeah, When I See You Smile with Bad English, and then Price of Love was another. But he never really had the career that some people might think he would have. It's like
right.
he should have had
Good.
more big hits than he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting though, there is a Kiss connection with
Mhm.
this album because there's a song in that album called Tears, which was written by a guy named Adam Mitchell, who you'll recognize from certain Kiss songs, but also Vinnie Vincent.
Ah, yes.
And oddly enough, before John Waite did a version of it, Peter Criss did a version of it.
Ah, interesting.
Let Me Rock You. So some weird trivia there. At number 10, 49 weeks in the chart, another huge album, another practically greatest
Oh
hits
my
album
God.
itself, Huey Lewis and the News and Sports. And between, I guess, I don't know, I guess Blondie at one point, but I mean, Pat Benatar, Billy Idol, and Huey Lewis and the News probably kept Chrysalis in business.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite albums of the 80s. Probably a desert island album for me too. Like you said, a greatest hits record. I still have this is a copy I bought more recently because I needed to replace my extremely well loved and beat up original version. I listened to it nonstop, and it stands up now. It's still a great, great album. Fantastic album.
If you, I would name the average radio listener, say, name five Huey Lewis and the News songs.
Oh, man.
They might say Power of Love or they might say Hip to Be Square, but chances are they're going to name a bunch of songs from this album.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that good.
Yeah.
Number 9, Holding, the debut album from big 80s artist, Cyndi Lauper, She's So Unusual. Girls Just Want to Have Fun is one of the all-time
I don't
classic.
think I've ever seen the back cover to that before.
I know, right? Like, look at her. She's got her shoes. She's
Yeah.
all beat up, but She Bop, Money Changes Everything, Time After Time, All Through the Night. There are a lot
Yeah.
of hits on this record, and it was a big one for her.
Yeah.
Good listen. Still a good listen for me. A lot of fun.
Number 8, down one notch in his 34th week. Probably the biggest, like maybe the debut, but this was probably the biggest album from the Cars and Heartbeat City. This was a Mutt Lange production,
Yep.
which is pretty easy to hear if you listen to it.
Oh, the vocals are
The background vocals, especially Magic.
Oh, especially Magic, yeah. You can hear
But I
them.
mean, this had You Might Think and Hello Again.
Drive.
Drive. I knew there was another big one. I was forgetting that.
Yeah.
And actually, now that at the time that this chart came out, Drive was probably the song that was in the charts.
Yes, it would have been, and it was a huge hit. This
Yeah.
was the album that introduced me to the Cars and led me to their amazing back catalog, which is fantastic.
This might have been one of the first albums I remember seeing on Elektra Records. I don't know why I remember that, but
That's an interesting tidbit. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Number seven. Oh, that's you. Go ahead.
Yep, number seven, Culture Club, the follow-up to their big album, Color by Numbers. This is Waking Up with the House on Fire. Culture Club was another one I think that Canada really embraced Culture Club overall,
Yeah.
and they had a ton of Canadian success. Was never a huge fan, but the songs are timeless.
Yeah, this album, I bet you did better. I probably didn't go top 10 in the States because they kind of had their run, I think. The
Yeah,
only semi-hit off this album was a song called The War Song,
yeah,
which I remember seeing the video, but I do remember this cover kind of stood out because Boy George colored his hair red, like just
yes,
vivid red,
yeah.
which he hadn't done before. And number six, another band that Canada like embraced
Oh, big time.
long before the US did. But this was sort of their breakthrough album. They were kind of gradually gaining in popularity, but U2, The Unforgettable Fire, this had Pride in the Name of Love, which is their first top 40 single in the US. But it's at holding at six this week in Canada.
And at number five, another legend, Mr. Stevie Wonder, and the soundtrack, another soundtrack from the movie The Woman in Red. Big
Of
hit
course,
up here.
this contained I Just Called to Say I Love You, which is a worldwide hit. Yeah.
Massive hit.
Yeah. Holding at number four this week, the late David Bowie and his album Tonight. This one was the follow up to Let's Dance. Didn't do quite as well as that one, although it did produce at least one of his classic 80s hits in Blue Jean.
Yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't think I
Yeah,
heard much from this one.
it didn't have the staying power of Let's
No,
Dance at all.
exactly. Now we're into the top three.
Yeah.
A huge comeback album for this legendary artist, Miss
Yeah.
Tina Turner. This was a massive album for her, Private Dancer, with her huge hit, What's Love Got to Do with
Yeah.
It? But this is a really good album overall.
Had the
And
title song written by Mark Knopfler, Dire
yeah,
Straits, had Better Be Good to Me. Yeah.
Better Be Good to Me might be my favorite Tina Turner song. The more I hear it, I love it. And I do hear it on 80s, themed radio stations a fair bit.
Yeah.
This was massive.
Yeah. Number two, up one with the same number of weeks on the chart. This was another famous CRO2 cassette that a lot of us
It
had.
was, I've got it.
Born in the USA. Yeah.
And the iconic cover,
Yeah.
right? Which has a lot of debate around it, which we won't get into that. But this is a greatest hits album too. I think an earlier album we talked about, Bryan Adams' Reckless, this one had the same. They both had six top 20 US singles.
Yeah.
And who can ever forget the debut single, Dancing in the Dark, and that classic video with Courtney Cox?
Yeah. Yeah, that might have been the first. That might have been the first I ever heard of Bruce Springsteen was hearing
It
that.
was for me too.
And a song that gets kind of forgotten is "Cover Me,"
Yep.
which was a top 10 single, but it didn't have a video,
No.
and that made a big difference. Of course, it was "I'm on Fire." That's one of those songs where the video is like twice as long as the song itself because it had a little bit of a concept.
That's
"Glory
right.
Days."
Glory Days, My
And he had another
Hometown.
song that didn't have a video but was a big hit, "I'm Going Down." And
Yep.
then finally, all the way in early '86, he had "My Hometown."
Brilliant album. And this, Tim, look at that. Remember when you used to
Remember that?
write? This
Yeah.
is my original copy that I wrote.
You initialed it. That's one of a kind. It's autographed.
Right.
Um, which brings us to the number one song or the number one selling album on this week in 1984, and probably several other weeks in 1984 as well.
Many weeks.
Yeah. Dearly beloved.
We are gathered here today to witness this amazing album from
Yeah.
Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain.
Yeah.
What a classic.
Yeah.
And the videos were everywhere and the songs were everywhere.
Yeah. Um, And it's funny because it's another one of those albums. It's like Reckless, it's like
Yep.
Virgin, whereas they were on the rise. These artists were on the rise. They were already, stars and probably big stars in certain pockets, but this was the one that kicked the doors open internationally, where it's like, if you hadn't heard of this artist
Absolutely.
before, now you're going to hear from them everywhere.
The cool thing too, and I'm going to divert quickly to the Billboard album chart. It was 1984 when it was either five, there were only five or six albums that were in the number one position.
Yeah, yeah,
In 84.
it's a very short list.
And
Yeah,
this is one of them because it was this, Thriller, Springsteen,
yeah,
Sports was up there. That's how many weeks this album,
yeah.
that's 30 some weeks, I think,
Yeah. And
at
if you
number.
think about, what it would take to have an album at number one, you've got to have that many people buying it week in and week out. So
Exactly.
no wonder these albums were like diamond selling albums, multi millions, because you can't maintain that number one position unless people just keep buying them.
Yeah,
So yeah, it was the era of the blockbuster album. 1984. Well, Thriller probably started it, but 1984 was a year when you had albums that had multiple hits from the same album. And
exactly.
that was something that continued for a lot of years, where you
It
just
did.
had this, maybe that's where the term blockbuster came from. I don't know. But if you listen to any oldies radio today, you're going to hear more songs from these early albums than any other year. I guarantee it,
Yeah,
as
you're
far as
right.
the 80s is concerned.
You're
So
100% right.
so there you go. That's
There you
the
go.
top selling albums 40 years ago in Canada on this date, or this week. Anyway, Chris, thanks once again for sitting in.
Ton of fun.
Always a pleasure, and it's always fun going through this. And you read certain titles, they remind you of something else. A lot of times it's a memory, which is always fun. Out there, what do you folks remember about these albums? Comment below, and we'll see you again on Tim's Final Confessions.